For those of you in the room who are in the news business, or marketers looking to reach some of the smartest, busiest people in the world, I imagine all the excitement around native advertising or content marketing over these last 18 months or so has been a bit of a delicate, if not difficult, challenge within your organizations. How do we maintain credibility among our audiences if we're a publisher or a brand when we're marketing to some of the most discerning people in the world? Advertorials have long been thought of as thinly veiled puff pieces that don't necessarily convey much of a brand message. But I'm here to tell you that that is not the case at all. And actually, native advertising, particularly as it pertains to the global executive, is simply a matter of supply and demand. For those of you not familiar, Quartz, or QZ.com, is a digitally native global business news site launched in 2012 as a guide to the new global economy. Quartz was built from the perspective that the world was going to change, and in order to change along with it, we were going to have to maintain a user-focused approach, listening to our readers, respecting their habits and their time and their intelligence. Quartz was a bet on the future, and the way that first bet manifested itself was through an HTML5 design for mobile first, tablet second, and desktop third. The next way we made a bet on the future was to completely go against the idea of running standard IAB advertising. And in fact, when we're seeking to reach a global executive, let's serve them content and ad units that actually are engaging to them and then more responsive for our advertisers. So as you'll see, this is an example of our Engage unit. It's a full screen, full bleed HTML5 unit that has lots of different functionalities and appears within the stream of our site. The next unit we call Bulletin is our example of sponsor content. It also appears every third to fifth story on our site, but appears natively. We had the deep conviction when we launched that actually we could help our advertisers create content that could stand up just as well next to our editorial. So I'm going to spend the next few moments talking about the opportunity that we see with native advertising. After all, it's what we've built the core of our business operation on. The supposition that great native advertising can serve as a powerful branding product, especially when done well. So let's get back to this whole idea of supply and demand. On the supply side, you have content from brands. For brands that are specifically targeting global executives, the content is inherently valuable. Why? Because the content is a byproduct of everything your brand has researched, invested in, and learned throughout the course of its existence. Your white papers aren't simply the product of a bunch of researchers or analysts set to write about an initiative. It's the history of your company. Goldman Sachs' macroeconomic outlook isn't simply the product of the researchers and writers assigned to write the paper. It's the product of a global institution's 150 years of global economic expertise, led by people who went on to run the US Treasury and the World Bank. On the demand side, you have the global executive. Remember, this is an audience of global executives hungry for content. Even if that executive isn't in the same industry as you are, what they get from tapping into your expertise is still intrinsically valuable because having a global perspective is a prerequisite for being a global executive. The challenge with all of this is that it's a latent market, and to truly unlock it, we need to connect supply to demand. But how? First, you need to find the content that's relevant to your target audience. There's any number of white papers and research studies on any company's website. You need to find the pieces that are most relevant and serve them to your users. Next, you need to make it consumable. If you're a financial institution, your expertise is finance, not headline optimization. If you're a consultancy, your expertise is strategy, not writing for the mobile web. The reality is, in these days, you're competing against people who built their entire career around designing for the web, and you're competing against content all over the web. You need to make sure that you're giving them something that they want to share. And finally, you need to put it in their right place, because they're not coming to you. They're in any number of their Twitter, LinkedIn feeds, or even email, where they can scroll forever without ever running out of content. Go find them there. The opportunity is to really turn that target audience into an engaged audience. As I mentioned, when we first set out to launch Quartz, we always told our users we would ask them what was most important to them. And as we all know, there's been so many studies done on the general population's media habits and attitudes towards advertising, but the executives are often left out of that discussion. Why? Because it's often difficult to engage this type of readership. It's expensive and complex work, but engaging this audience was imperative to our mission, and that's why we did this study. I want to take a few minutes to give a little bit of background on exactly how we ran this survey. As I said, the study was a little bit different and unconventional in its survey approach. We used an approach that we thought would make more sense given the executive audience we were trying to capture. One example of this is our survey's design and experience. This is an example I'm sure many of you have received in your inbox. It's lots of different answers without any type of alphabetical order, rhyme, or reason as to what your options are. And often, that experience is even more complex on mobile. We took the idea to make a mobily optimized, very, very simple and visual site that users could actually swipe through very simply, and the result was a phenomenal completion rate. We had 65 questions. It took about 16 minutes to complete this survey, but we saw a 55% completion rate, which is about 3 to 5 times higher than the average completion rate for surveys. These executives found their experience so incredible that they actually took to social media to complement it. Once we identified these people, we did a little bit of a different outreach to them. Traditionally, when you're surveying these individuals, you give them something like an incentive of airline miles or a Starbucks card. Imagine executive really getting this in their inbox. We weren't convinced that that was going to work for us. So the way that we went about it, we took a highly targeted and personalized approach, working within our own audience channels. And those of partner organizations with similarly executive level audiences. In each case, we really paid attention to the language we used and other small details. And when something wasn't working, we changed it. Here's one example. We sent this email to about 500 carefully selected senior executives. And there are 3 things to note within this email. It's long, which runs counter to a lot of email practices. The call to action doesn't actually appear until the 4th paragraph and is actually the 2nd link in the email. And it doesn't offer a financial incentive. Instead, we appealed to something more profound. The opening sentence is, the news business is changing more quickly than ever before. An entire industry is changing, and you, as some of the smartest, busiest people in the world, have the opportunity to help us serve you better. We also recruited people via our daily brief email newsletter that I'll talk about in a few minutes. But what we did there was we were able to improve click-through rate from the 4 different executions almost 10-fold. We saw the best result coming from our Saturday recruitment that was a bit more playful. Are you reading this A, a phone, a tablet, a computer, or D, something else? No, really, we want to know. And finally, we get to the results. What we've seen in the past is when companies go out to field some sort of research study, it ends up in some sort of PDF or white paper and a bit forgotten about. Instead, we thought about the design of this. And you can find the actual, we created an HTML5 site. You can actually find the results of our global executive study here. And if you're interested in our methodology, we did a Medium post around it, which you can also find here. So let's talk about the results. In the end, we ended up with 2,000 respondents, 940 of them that we identified as actual senior level executives, so VP level or above. They came from 61 countries. 43% of them were actual C-level or equivalent. And as you can see, from many, many different industries. And the 8 people that you can see on the right-hand side of this screen, they actually gave us their email, their LinkedIn profile. They asked to be contacted again because they enjoyed this so much and really respected that we were seeking to serve them better. We found that 44% of executives do most of their news consumption first thing in the morning. And the other majority were checking their news throughout the day. The way that we take advantage of this habit is through our Daily Brief email newsletter. So 130,000 people around the world get our newsletter, which is not just a marketing vehicle into Quartz, but an actual utility. What we do is we do small snippets of curated news from around the web, that things you need to know before you start your day, what happened while you were sleeping, what to look for in the market ahead. We've seen this maintain a 40 to 50% open rate from 5,000 subscribers to 130,000 subscribers. And what we've done with our advertisers is integrate their content right into the flow of this Daily Brief newsletter. It gets lots of engagement, and as you can see, often also receives lots of social media attention. 61% of executives primarily use a mobile device to consume news. I think with all of the native advertising hoopla that's gone on today, we often forget about the mobile device. And when you're thinking about a global executive, that's where you need to reach them. So what we've made sure to do with a piece like this that we did for GE on Indian lifespans in contrast to other developing countries, we took that functionality of a timeline and made it usable also on mobile devices, taking advantage of that swipe technology. And we saw engagement with this, both social and on-site, really, really strong. The inbox is the new homepage. 60% of executives read an email newsletter as their go-to source for news. So we took our page off that, and when we launched Quartz India with our partner GE, in addition to allowing our readers to hear more about the Quartz India launch, we also allowed them to hear more from our sponsor GE. Not only did we get a number of respondents, but every time GE actually has sent out email newsletters to them, reminding them that there are going to be new pieces of content launched, it's maintained a 45% open rate. So this has been a really strong vehicle for their content marketing. If you write quality content, it's as good as getting shared. 9 in 10 executives said that they would share a piece of quality content with their people that they work with. So what we did here was we really try and encourage our advertisers to write headlines meant for sharing. And we monitor what that does in social media. So here's an example from Adobe, who was trying to reach CMOs. We A/B tested headlines and found that actually this headline about how encrypted videos is redefining the mobile experience actually was shared among the CMO set. So I think what's another valuable lesson is just because you do content, you're not finished after you hit publish. You need to watch and really take note of who is sharing that piece of content. Another way that we've strategically placed social is around news and numbers. So we did a piece of content for GE, again, around our Quartz India product, and took small bits of data from each of them and created social cards that really helped bring in people into the story. We see that people like to share snackable bits of information. So it's been a nice way for us to actually drive traffic into the longer form content. This is something that we've done from an editorial perspective as well. And what we always try and do is watch what's succeeding when it comes to our editorial and do the same thing when it comes to sponsor content. And I think this was something that overjoyed us, but is really important for everyone in this room to understand today. 86% of executives are genuinely interested in content from brands, particularly if that content is a reflection of their brand's expertise. So when we ask them, what are you interested from hearing about from brands? Industry analysis was definitely the first most important one. So things like the macroeconomic outlook for 2015 from Goldman Sachs was one of our most successful pieces of native content on the site. This piece of content from UPS around the 5 major European exporting trends actually was picked up and tweeted by Ben Rooney, the WSJ former tech editor, to say, I hate to say this, but this advertorial on Quartz is better than a lot of stories on some tech sites. That's what we strive to achieve every single time. It's our Super Bowl of native advertising. Another thing they mentioned having interest in is new products and innovations, which is why we see content like this story and this story do incredibly well as well. This has been a very collaborative experience with our advertisers. We help them understand what the Quartz audience, this audience of global executives, are interested in, and therefore really improve their overall performance. When we ask them about native ads or ads that are meant to really appear in stream or look like the content on the site that they're reading. They claim that they were twice as likely to be remembered than banner ads and almost 5 times more likely to be remembered than full-screen interstitials, which is why we integrate all of these engage units right in the stream of the ads after every article. And on mobile ads, in stream of mobile sites, they're 2.5 more times likely to be noticed than in apps. And that makes sense to us because in apps, you're often seeing interstitial takeovers or bottom banners on the bottom of the screen, and we've all been a bit trained to ignore them. But the way that we've integrated these ads right into the stream of the site continues to perform really well, like this. So in terms of mobile for Quartz, we've been able to see an equal sell-through between mobile and desktop, selling at exact the same CPMs because of the performance of these mobile ads. There's no drop-off from desktop. So where do we go from here? What we've really tried to help our advertisers understand is that to really engage this target audience, we abide by these guiding principles. Produce quality, be relevant, respect habits, iterate, optimize for mobile, social, and of course, the most important thing, be transparent. Thank you.